Uh, Welcome to Passing Strangers Who May Have Caught the Freight Train. Good luck to you. It's a hazardous business. I want people to have an attitude that life is, well, you know it already. It's a hazard. I know it. You know it. But I think very often we adopt a commercial mindset. We adopt a mindset that whomever we're speaking to is a merchant. I've done it myself. And then we presume that they are people in a position to give us something, to owe us something. Now, sometimes they actually are. Sometimes they have sold themselves as something, and they do need to maintain that standard. And when it all just suddenly drops out, you fall through their trapdoor, as I have done on a couple of occasions, quite severely. That is an alarming experience because they are making money from the system. They have sold themselves as something, some kind of authority, some kind of mentor, some kind of person who would take you under their wing, and they're not that. And suddenly all is revealed. But what I'm talking about here is somebody like me. I'm just, talking on the internet, and I'm not making money from it. And I may at times, very rarely actually, I may at times sound like I'm a little bit irritated with the way that the market system works. And the fact that nobody is bestowing upon me money for my effort. But that's generally a passing mood, although it's also a very real reality that I will sometimes acknowledge. It's the real reality that people who really have inferior ideas and inferior ways of stating it tends to get more acknowledgement. And this is, once again, this is not a cry for acknowledgement, but a recognition of how the system works. So we've got to be very careful. I'm not I'm not sad that I'm not them, but I am sad that the system isn't different. You see, that's a different judgment that I'm making. And that's a big problem I have, that people may, and in fact have generally assumed that when I criticize something, it's like, what's it called, like sour milk or some kind of, like sour grapes, that I'm very, the assumption in the 90s was that if anybody criticizes you, it's just sour grapes. And there's only one system, that's the libertarian capitalist system. And the really great people, the really wise people, actually, there's no wisdom in libertarian capitalism, but maybe the really intelligent, the ones with the big processing power, they make it and the others don't. And everybody else just has sour grapes. So I do admit that I'm a bit wounded from the 90s, because that was a horrible period of time where you tried to say something of value, something that was actually true, something that was factual, something that was authentic even, and people would just say, well, you can't say it because we've identified you as somebody that isn't one of the winners, one of the people that come to the top, the creme de la creme. So you must be just saying something from a position of sour grapes. And it really, it's a huge mental and emotional blackmail. I don't mean that it's men that do it, and I don't mean that they are black. It's usually the white if they are, and sometimes and very often those who win automatically without really having to struggle or feel pain may well be white men. But it doesn't mean that that's the way that the world works. I'm not subscribing or promoting a system of metaphysics, subscribing to or promoting a system of metaphysics. I'm just saying that's how it has been very often. And So I think we intuit that. I think we know it. I think we understand that the outsider voices tend to be silenced and that there are powerful ways of doing it. But now it's not the 90s anymore, and things already have changed, and already it's very bad, I think, nowadays to not deem others equal to oneself. And so, at least on the internet, there's progress, although it doesn't seem a very deep level in some respects. It seems more like a humdrum progress, but it's progress. Uh, it's not like we're revering people for their very different message. It's just we are acknowledging that they shouldn't be shouted down on principle. So that's the progress that's been made. It's incremental. We're not actually acknowledging the good that could come from an outsider, but we're saying don't shout them down anyway. So like, let's just not do that this time because we might suffer, we might get burnt as well. And there is the millennium generation, I think, that's driving it all. They're much more they're more internet savvy. They are more aware of the morality of being on the internet. Also like ethics and the internet. They've not divorced the two, so they're not like a troll by night and a nice person by day. They are the same person, and that's really the advance that we have, which comes from them. Thank you, millennial generation. Uh, so I do get let's just try that again. I do get these days just mildly annoyed. I get an annoyance of recognition more than a deep rumbling aggressive annoyance. As I used to, I do get an annoyance of recognition when somebody's demanding from me that I have to live up to their standards, and then they have this double move. They say it's, but however, my standards are the universal standards, and then there's also from the 90s there's the implied insinuation that if you're not living up to my standards, you must be infantile, you must be taking things personally, you must be sensitive in the wrong way, not artistic sensitive, not environment sensitive, not human sensitive, but just a sore loser, a sensitive in the wrong way. So I recognize those 90s tropes, and I know they're old and they don't affect me anymore, but I also recognize now, having just been through this horrible crisis, internal, intrapersonal crisis that I've been through, that the big problem of my life is not what others have said it was. It is not at all what others have implied by any means. My big problem was the multiplication of the value standards that I had to live by. So it's okay in most cases if you have one value standard, one system of values from your culture to live by. But in my case, I've always had two. And when you have it, so imagine, once again, being old-fashioned and thinking of an overhead projector, and it's a little that plastic thing that you printed onto overhead slide, whatever it's called. Imagine that you had a little map with that transparency. You drew a little map with it, and this is your paradigm. This is on the map. This is good behavior on the map. That's bad on the map. This is authentic on the map. That's normal, and so on and so forth. So you have that map, and it's called modernity. Then you have another transparency with a different print on it, and on that map you have tradition, and it's got things plotted out in totally different parts of that map, where authenticity isn't the same as where it is in modernity. Authenticity is somewhere north, and sincerity is somewhere just, the opposite side of the map. And persistence is not there, it's over here, and endurance is featured differently, it's understood differently, and friendship is really different as well. And so you go, and then you put both of those transparencies on top of each other, and then you switch on your overhead projector and you say, okay, everybody, I want you to follow these rules. And then how do you do it? Because everything is mapped not only in different positions. You have two places for authenticity, you have two places for sincerity. Not only that, but you're expected to do both at the same time or risk failure. So you've got to obey sincerity, being pouring your heart out, that's sincerity, but then you've also got to obey that's the modern version of sincerity, but you've also got to obey the traditional version of sincerity, which is persisting with others through their trials and difficulties and keeping a stiff upper lip and not mentioning it. So how do you keep both levels of sincerity going? How do you do it when the map is doubled, and not only doubled, but contradictory and at odds? That's been the problem of my life, that I've been trying to do two things. And generally what will happen is that the people who I've been trying to adapt to in modernity will suddenly viciously and unprovokedly attack me and pull the rug out from under me, because they detect that there's something else going on, that I'm not completely the same as they are, and that my language and my meanings do not always concur with what they mean when they use those particular ideas or words or attitudes. And the reason is that I'm going on two maps at the same time. I'm trying to do too much. I'm trying to comply with too much. And this is not only very stressful, very mentally confusing, but it leads to failure. And it leads to people suddenly becoming very, very suspicious and very paranoid about oneself. So what I've realized recently, having gone through this really horrible mental crisis, is that I need to relinquish some of my values. I was actually already trying to do that, but I was trying to relinquish the traditional values, but they've come back to bite me double time on the bum. So now I'm doing the opposite. I said the opposite error, the opposite attempt, hopefully not too erroneous, trying to do the opposite, because I may be truer to myself as a traditional person than I am as a modern person. So I'm trying to now just relinquish some of the burden of modernity, which is sort of divulging yourself and always trying to meet the other person and see it in a very narrow psychological way, and then not burden them too much with complexities about history or things that don't automatically relate to modernity. And just really going the extra mile, going the extra 3 miles, going the extra 12 miles to meet them in modernity. And then, it's often, even still, you'll get people that just sort of, oh, you're not making sense to me, they say. You're not making sense to me. You must be confused, or, they put the burden back on me. Well, they're confused and they're unclear, but they put the burden back on me. You must be confused. You must be unclear. You must work harder to meet me where I am in modernity. That's a recurrent experience for me, that I've tried and tried and tried, and then still it's not enough. You're still reading from two maps, and yes, it's a shame. It's also, I think, unavoidable, but to try to minimize the issue, to make it easier for myself, I'm now attempting to read much more from the traditional map and stick to that one instead, and not burden myself with trying all the time to, express an emotion, divulge the emotion, process the emotion, debate trauma. it's just multiplying the burden. It's multiplying the psychological stress. No computer system functions according to two algorithms simultaneously. It's a recipe for disaster, and that's why well, it's why I've made this new channel. It's not going to be. It's going to be difficult if you do follow me here. It's not going to be an attempt to really bridge anything. I just will use this for my own personal benefit, and if there are others who can gain benefit from listening to what I say, then that's well and good. But the days of me bending over backwards to try to do something that's actually impossible for me, I wasn't built that way. I wasn't built in modernity, and I can't be the complete bridge between my original childhood thinking and modernity. Those days are over. So I'm not going to try it anymore. I've always felt I know very often it's been given to me as intended helpful advice. Just give us a few crumbs, give us a few cookies, and we'll end up liking you. But because I don't think in that way, and then when I do try it, I fall. Lot of metaphors again. When I do try it, I fall flat on my face into the pie dish. It's not something I would at this late stage in my life. It's not something I'm going to do again. And so just try and relate to us as modern people. Yes, okay. And I have tried. I've written a PhD. I have written books that do bridge in many ways the gap between tradition and modernity. Very painful books they were to write too, because you've got to really trust in the reader that they can also see that bridge. It's a little bit of a glass or crystal bridge at times and very hard to walk across. And you've got to really expect a lot from the reader to be able to have that amount of energy and passion and compassion to make that connection with you. It's not something that everybody can do, and I think it's the very rare person that can or will. So those are my thoughts for today.